I was going to ask, is Mark Twain dead? And I had a paper all written, and then I started listening to other papers here, and I listened to the conversation around tables and over wine, and I hope you'll forgive me and indulge me, because what I've learned in those conversations makes me rethink how I need to approach my talk. In particular, I've heard tales of the humanities under duress on campus after campus. Cuts in faculty numbers, salaries lagging, facilities not managed, no replacement faculty when the old guard retires. I mean, I'm almost 68, and if we had one of Galton's bell curves, I'd probably be smack in the middle given this audience. And when I first started coming to these things, it was pretty balanced. Those of us who were here my age or older were young when this thing started. And we had an old guard. We had folk who were mentoring us and taking care of us. And I see so few young faculty here. And many people have talked about that. It's worrisome, to say the least. It's like we're all playing a game of whack-a-mole from the wrong side. We're being whacked. So if Mark Twain is in danger of dying, it might be in part because of the death of the humanities by 1,000 cuts. So I'm going to speak more from a personal point of view than from a scholarly point of view. I'll have a bit of my research here, but I'm cutting it radically. If you have questions about it, ask me later and I can fill in some of the details. Now, you don't know about me without you have ever read a book or two I've written about Mark Twain, and that is a matter, at least to me. Mr. Mark Twain's books shaped my life since before I ever read them, when my grandpa talked about Mark Twain's books and bankruptcy. I heard about Mark Twain and money before any of us here wrote about it. I also learned that right after my grandparents moved with my father and my aunt from Chicago to Denver, while they were building a new house, they first lived in a horrible apartment, which they called Awful Court. And my grandfather explained the pun to me from Pudd'nhead Wilson and made sure I remembered that it was Mark Twain who wrote it and the whole thing. My grandfather was an autodidact and felt that, if he didn't say Mark Twain, it was Shakespeare. Like every other sentence, he had a quotation from one or the other. My aunt used to say, when my grandfather would throw out a quotation, he'd say, "Who said that?" She said, "If I say Shakespeare, I've got a good chance of being right." Anyway, so when I saw Scholastic Book Service's collection of Mark Twain short works, I bought it, figuring that if my grandfather recommended it, it was probably serious and important. But when I got it, the first thing in there was how I edited an agricultural newspaper once, and I couldn't make head nor tail of it. I figured I was just not sophisticated enough to get it. It wasn't until later I realized it was meant to be funny, which kind of opens it up pretty easily. It turned out that I also had to reconsider my grandfather's seriousness. He may have been a child of Mennonites. He told me he learned right from wrong because if it was fun, it was wrong. But he was thoroughly apostate and actually had a dry sense of humor that took me years to appreciate. At any rate, that funny Mark Twain was for me transformative. It modeled intellectual play, flexibility, a moral purpose that was expansively humane, open, and flexible. I found the mix delightful, and it gave me a kind of companionship in my adolescence. To have been fortunate enough to follow that companionship into this circle of inquiry humbles me. Many of the people I've met through the Mark Twain Circle, the American Humor Studies Association, the Elmira Conference, and many other conferences I've been to over time that I've been invited into have shaped my career. And more importantly, many of the people who I've met have shaped my career. Well, I look around the room, I see Bob. I don't know if Susan is here right now. It's a little bit backlit, but I've certainly put out Susan. Shelley's not here. Lou Budd, of course, is not here. Bruce, Linda, Jim Cox, who has passed, Vic Doynell, and many, many others who are living or dead have helped me grow into not just a scholar, but I think a fine teacher, and I think a person whose moral compass is fairly substantial. I think this community is one of those places that supports the kinds of things we do as humanist scholars in the academy. They have shared their experience, their passion for scholarship, and for its profound impact on the world, and their compassion. So, thank all of you for that collegiality and for this community, which, if the humanities are under pressure, our humanity here has been a lifesaver to me. And I also want to say that not only have you enriched my mind and heart, but you've also furthered my career in very tangible ways. And I'm going to call out Linda right here because she was the one who told me about the job opportunity at the University of California's brand new campus in Merced, where I've spent the last 18 years. Now, for those of you who haven't visited, and I know most of you haven't, it's an almost unbelievable place. It's a new research university to serve students who've never imagined themselves in such a place. It's a Hispanic serving institution, which isn't just over the threshold of qualifying. We're over 50% Hispanic. It's a minority serving institution where Native Americans are the only ethnic group on the campus smaller than white. I mean, think about that. It's extraordinary. This is the University of California, already in R1, and this student demographic. Two-thirds of the students are the first in their families to attend college. Over two-thirds are Pell eligible. They're poor. Until Trump was reelected, 10% of them were undocumented. That percentage is obviously going down. We're not bringing new undocumented students in because they're laying low. The expectation originally was that our students would be drawn from the Central Valley, and we do draw from the Central Valley more than any other UC except for Davis, which is also in the Central Valley, but we're in the South, and they're closer to the edge of the Bay Area. But only Berkeley in the UC system draws as broadly from the state as UC Merced. Now this surprised everybody, but what it was if you drill down into the zip codes where our students come from, they may be in the LA basin, but they're not on the west side. They're in East Los Angeles, or Compton, or Pacoima. If they're from Sacramento, same thing. From zip codes where family income is significantly lower than those students who go to Berkeley. Bay Area, the same. Although it's hard to believe anybody in the Bay Area has a low income anymore. I don't know how anyone lives there. But regardless, what we're seeing here is students who see Merced as a place where they're welcome, where they don't have to pretend to be something they're not, where they feel comfortable around other people who have shared very similar experiences. And we graduate almost 70% of them. We are the only public institution in the US with over 60% Pell eligible and over 60% graduation rate. Now, why am I saying this to you? Because I have to tell you, I've enjoyed teaching these students more than I've enjoyed teaching students anywhere else, including at the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League University. They were great students, don't get me wrong. They were extremely well prepared, they were energetic, a blast. But I didn't really have to do much, and I didn't have much to offer them. But at Merced, I learned more from them than they learned from me, and I have a lot to teach them. It's just a wonderful place to be. And just to give you a sense of what these students are like, I'm going to tell you two things. One, I can't count how many times after I've taught a class, one or two students will come up to me and say, Dr. Camfield, I really enjoyed this class, and I would have gotten a better grade if I'd worked harder. No grade grubbing, taking responsibility. You hear stories about young people. I just don't see that. And for them, the sky's the limit. The big story that we use to talk about that is the first entering class that actually came in as freshmen. When they were graduating 4 years later, we asked them, who do you want to be your graduation speaker? And they said, we want Michelle Obama. And the dean of students said, sure, but you're not going to get it. They said, yes, we will. And they proceeded to write thousands of Valentines to her and film Valentines to her. And she actually came. And when she came, she started off her beautiful speech by saying, I started getting these things. And at first I was but then I was like, they're persistent. Who are they? What is that? I've never heard of these Seaver said. So I started looking into it. And I started seeing, statistics were younger then, but they were still consistent. And she learned about the kind of community outreach we do in our research. Community engaged scholarship is one of our things. And that we get our undergraduates into research, into their own communities, where they are the bridge while we're listening to what the communities need. And she said, that's what a university should be. And that's not what I saw growing up in the south side of Chicago, which had walls up against people like me. And our students were eating it up. They got her here, they wooed her, and they convinced her of what we were. And she became one of our best advertisements, if you will. So I tell you this because I want you to understand the urgency with which, as a professor and an administrator, I ask the question, what kind of education do these students deserve? And I do mean education. I mean a drawing out, which the root of that word is from, a drawing out of their aptitudes, a drawing from their community and cultural wealth, a drawing from their dispositions and interests. I don't want to train students like this. I don't want to train them for a job. I don't want to train them to follow in someone else's footsteps. That seems wrong to me. So what kind of education would that be? And what I think they're entitled to is the best that the humanities have to offer. Now, they don't understand that coming in. No surprise, without the cultural capital of families who've attended college before, they want something practical, and I don't blame them for that at all. After all, an education should help you earn a living and participate in our polis and find ways to make your life more fulfilling. It's not an either or, and I think the humanities have always understood that life has multiple values and multiple possibilities, and that they intersect and they conflict. And that's the education I want them to have. So the question is, how do we get that? In a curriculum that is attenuated, a curriculum that is tech-focused, a curriculum in a world that has been talking since at least 1980 that the sole purpose of higher education is economic. So, if the humanities have been under attack for a very long time, and I feel that that's what I need to give my students, and I feel you probably feel the same way about your students. I love mine, I think they're unique. I hope every one of you feels the same way about your students. And I suspect you do, from my conversations with you. Not just today, or yesterday, or this visit, but over the last almost 40 years. So I'm broadening my question, not to just is Twain dead, but are the humanities dead? Do we have a legacy in the next generation of scholars to keep humanistic dispositions alive? And if we do, does Mark Twain need to be taught anymore? Is he sick or dead or something? Well, Dr. C has checked some vital signs, and I am not happy to say that the prognosis is not good. Now, if you wonder about my credentials to be a doctor of the humanities, I'll tell you that I've served as a humanities representative on the promotion and tenure committees of 2 universities. I served as the faculty chair of all the humanities at UC Merced before they broke into disciplinary departments. I served as the vice provost who oversaw all academic personnel actions at UC Merced, and I served as provost who allocated funding for all faculty positions, among other things. Indeed, as faculty and administrator, I was involved in every appointment or promotion of every humanities faculty member who was hired after I arrived in 2007. And I am here to tell you that faculty is incredibly diverse in just about every way we measure, and they're quite young. I have seen the future, and I'll give you some predictions. But before the predictions, the diagnosis. The institutions supported in the humanities broadly are not thriving. Now, I've done some work in looking at K-12 curricula, and I won't go into the details as I expected to, but let me tell you that I followed Texas's recent new curriculum. In the first draft of it, they had 2 Mark Twain short stories for middle school. In the final draft, they have none. No Mark Twain, 0, none. Now, Florida still has a couple of things. However, those are recommended, and they also recommend anthologies that don't have any Mark Twain. And it's easier for schools to do anthologies. And I also noticed that McGraw-Hill, which is one of those companies with the anthologies, also has a list of novels, as they call them, i.e. anything that's longer than a novella. It could be an autobiography. It could be a piece of social science, but no, it's a novel. I've often wondered why my students talk about any large book as a novel. Now I know. I just learned. It's amazing. If the publisher doesn't even know genre, ladies and gentlemen, the humanities are in trouble. Okay. Libraries. Budget cuts, right? Competing media and censorship. This is the worst period for censorship for libraries that the American Library Association has ever tracked. Now, mind you, they didn't start tracking in the 19th century. You know, there was plenty of censorship back then. But regardless, this kind of censorship has changed too. Now it is interest groups, and mostly right-wing, but not completely, also left-wing. So interest groups are attacking libraries, primarily school libraries. And the interesting thing to me is that Mark Twain, who was in the top 5 in the 80s and 90s, now is down to like 30 and 50 because he's gone. He is removed from almost every curriculum and limited access in every school library in the country. And public libraries are attacked too, and they're dependent on tax funds from their communities. So the humanities are in trouble again because of the intense censorship. Ideas are dangerous, the right wing in particular really knows it, and they are after us. Book clubs. Well, most book clubs are kind of sponsored by publishers, so no surprise, it's almost all current literature. That's not a problem. Book clubs are thriving and people are reading great stuff. But in terms of the conversation that humanists think of as going from way back all the way to the present and imagining a future, that's truncated. So book clubs are kind of stuck in a presentist frame. And I think that's bad for the humanities. Now, there are a couple of exceptions. There's the Great Books program, but no surprise, there's no Mark Twain in the Great Books. Talk about a stuffy canon. Okay. And then HarperCollins has come up with a book list for the 250th anniversary of the United States, and it's pulled from their list, and I thought, oh goody, there's going to be lots of Mark Twain here. 1, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and if you look at them currently, they're sponsoring these book clubs, so they have the list of all the books people have read, and then the ones that are on the list that haven't been read yet. You go down 5 screens to get to the end of the we haven't read books left. The 5th screen, they've got 3 on it. The screen above is where Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is. So they're not even planning to read it until, what, next year? I don't know. But my point is here, even institutions that you would think would have some incentive aren't pushing Mark Twain. All right, now the big one, the one we all know about, higher education and the humanities in it. There are structural problems, attenuating and changing the humanities. And the first of these is scientism. The personnel processes in American higher education are run by an idea of discovery as being paramount. And the humanities, then, humanistic scholars, have to figure out something new to say. And that means when you're looking at someone old and you see the bibliography, your heart breaks. And so you say, well, what can I find that I can write about that's new? And then on the other hand, you've got the intense hierarchy that Bob Hurst was talking about. Graduate students are nobodies and on up, right? I had a friend who applied for a job at Harvard as an assistant professor, and he quickly learned they have a separate lounge for the associate professors and full professors from the untenured. Yeah, okay. So with that kind of hierarchy, there's also a pull back to some kind of normal. So what's a young professor going to do? I gotta do something new, but it's got to be visible to the senior folk. So theory becomes the common ground that you can apply across a large boundary. So now we have not the conversation of the literature, but a conversation of philosophers about literature that anchors us together. And so where does the content conversation go? I think pretty wide. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's really even hard to talk about the art that we're studying collectively. It's now a much more theoretical rather than a practical or aesthetic endeavor, because it has to be. How else can junior faculty succeed? They've got to be visible and understood and novel. Okay, and then there's also the problem of neoliberalism. We are so backward. We are still in a gift economy. We exchange papers. We give them away for free. That's the way we build our connections. And then Elsevier takes our copyrights and sells them back to us and breaks the library's budget. But this gift exchange feeling that we have in our collegiality is not the way universities are being run. They're being run, quote, as businesses. Oh my God, that was one of the horrors about being a provost. All the business speak. If I heard think outside of the box one more time, the way I entertain myself and I actually imagine things about those dead metaphors, I start thinking, well, what's inside the box? Schrodinger's cat? Who changes Schrodinger's cat box? The only way to get through the business bureaucracy. You know, the one thing that a generative AI is good for is writing cliches for bureaucratic memos. I highly recommend it. Unfortunately, it came online too late for me to use as provost. That would have saved many days of bullshit. Anyway, I mean, nobody reads this stuff anyway, so you just produce it and send it off, and someone gets it in their inbox, and then they produce something. And it's perfect for AI, totally artificial, and no real intelligence. Anyway, but we're in a supply and demand structure where we're talking about butts in seats, another one of those sayings that I just loathe. You know, you gotta get your butts in the seats in order to pay for everything that's going on in the university. And you have to publish what sells. There's a scarcity mentality that we have to live up to metrics. There are literally programs universities can buy to see how well your faculty are doing in terms of their publications vis-a-vis other people in higher education. We didn't buy it. I think it's awful. Okay, and a good thing that has been changing are student demographics and faculty demographics. But we can't take for granted anymore the valuable content when we have new students and new faculty who have new interests and come from different kinds of places. And there's also the problem of consumerism, the degree to which students think they're buying a degree. And so what's the transactional nature? Education can't be transactional. Okay, you know all this. Is there anything to be done? Well, on the basis of my leadership experience, I think the answer is yes. And I had to do much reading to become a reasonably good leader, and a few of the titles that mattered the most to me were Stuart Hubert Dreyfus' Mind Over the Machine, which I bring up because it's pertinent to so much of the conversation that's been going on here, an early challenge to artificial intelligence. Cohen and March, leadership in an organized anarchy, which is talking about higher education. I love talking about universities as organized anarchies. It's just a delicious term, and it's so right. And the third is John O'Malley's Four Cultures of the West, which really helped me understand the ways in which faculty use the same language to mean very different things. Now, I'm going to talk about O'Malley for a minute because he talks about humanism in a way that I think is really relevant. His book was a delayed response. It came out in 2004, Harvard University Press, to the Snow Leave Us Two Cultures controversy of the 60s. And he said that actually, if you look at Western intellectual traditions, there are four discourses. There's the prophetic discourse, the scientific discourse, the humanistic discourse, and the artistic, i.e. representational plastic arts discourse. And I'm not going to talk about that one much because it's really been attenuated in higher education. But the sort of classic mode for each of these four is, for the prophetic, it's the sermon; for the scientific, it's the proof; for the humanistic, it's the paradox; and of course the image for the last. And two of them are hard. They believe they have absolute knowledge. Natural laws or divine laws. And humanists don't. Humanists are soft. They think knowledge is contingent, and that in a William Jamesian sense, it's pragmatic, that we co-create, but there are also bounds to that. And the negotiation is the art of living. The prophetic and scientific are transcendent and theoretical. The humanistic is in time and place and is conversational. The prophetic and scientific demand doctrinal clarity. They may argue about it, but they're looking for the right answer. Humanism focuses on balancing virtues and values. It's victory versus compromise, hierarchy versus fluidity, knowing versus growing, aptitude versus dispositions. And I think you can see where I'm going here. That humanism, right now, we're using to cover the prophetic tradition and the humanistic tradition. A lot of what the university does is pushes us toward a prophetic position, toward the theoretical, toward the transcendent, toward the argumentative. I don't think that's what our students need, and I don't feel like it's what I need. Now, there are no clear lines. O'Malley is a Jesuit, and with his thoroughness, he talks about how individuals had all three kinds of trainings, sometimes all four kinds of trainings all at once. And different times they would be manifesting in different ways. Luther, obviously prophetic, but had a humanistic education as well. And that's the point. It's difficult to live in a humanistic framework, to reside comfortably or even uncomfortably in doubt or paradox. Our commitment to humanism is weakened by the institutional structure of the academy. And one way for us to recover the humanistic disposition is our study of Twain. He was torn between the knowing and the doubting stance, and that tension drives his creativity. And I think his battle would be good for our students now. Managing the scientism of our techno age requires humanistic dispositions, openness, curiosity, human-centeredness, flexibility, values-centeredness, openness to compromise, growth orientation, delighting in uncertainty and incompleteness, openness to beauty, openness to pleasure for its own sake, skeptical of utility. These are difficult dispositions to cultivate, and Twain's works exemplify the difficulty, but he faced it, even as he formulated that difficulty in a phrase that is paradoxically both scientific in stating a natural law and humanistic. He said, "What is the most rigorous law of our being? Growth. I like growth. I even like growing old, more or less. As for the humanities, I think real humanism has much to offer, maybe even something marketable enough to make them popular again. May the humanities once again experience growth pains." Thank you.